Here I'm going to show you 3 ways to dramatically speed up your macros, and I'm going to show you them through the context of a real-world example where we go through 30,000 cells in this table and change the values in each cell. And we're going to be using a timer to compare the difference between all 3 of the methods and to see just how much time we can save, which is going to be a lot.
Before we start, check the video description and click the link to Teach Excel so you can download the files for the tutorial and follow along. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.
All right, here is our sample data set. It is just straight up text for 10,000 rows and a few columns, not too many. But there are no formulas, there are no links, there's nothing too crazy. Now let's go to the VBA window and get started, Alt F11. And if you downloaded this workbook, open up Module 1 and go to the very first macro. And here is the downloadable file, by the way, with all of the comments in it. And I wanted you to see this before we start coding so you can see how beneficial it is to download the workbook. I modeled this off of the workbooks I have in my full VBA course, where I structure them so that they are a reference. The reference guide mentality means there are almost no bare lines of code and everything is thoroughly explained. So let's go with the very first example, which is don't select cells. And I'm going to clear out most of this and leave the timer in there. And we are going to build this from scratch and this one as well. But don't worry, I'm going to walk you through everything. And this is the timer, by the way. This is what starts the timer, and this is what ends the timer and outputs it in the immediate window, which we will go to when we run the macro. So what we're going to do is to put all of our code within the timer. So stop selecting cells. It's the #1 thing people do that slows down their macros tremendously. And we are going to create a little loop, and I'm going to create a variable for the loop, dim cell as range, for each cell in range, and what we want to do is to go through C, D, and E in this table. So C2 to E 10,001. So C2 to E 10,001. And then next cell. And when you are in here, what a lot of people do when they start out programming is they make their cell reference, which we can now do using the cell variable, and then they go like this, select. And then they go on the next line and they do selection dot whatever you want to do. Here we are just going to put some text in front of the current selection value. So selection dot value equals, and the text that we want to put in front of it concatenated with its current value, selection dot value. So it doesn't exactly matter what you do. The point is never, ever, ever do this right here, where you select the cell first and then do something with that selection. The macro recorder makes you think that you should be doing this, but you should not. And why is that? Well, let's hit Control G or go to a View and Immediate Window to get the little immediate window guy and make him a little smaller. Make this a little smaller. And let's take a look at our data set right now. So we are going to go through 30,000 cells and put some text in front of it. And the timer, so how long it takes, is going to output a value down here. So let's click in here and hit play or F5 or just run and run. And let's see how long this takes. Notice that the cursor is doing something. We can see some activity, and now the Excel window is freaking out a little bit, and I can't really do anything in it. So let's see how long this takes. I have a feeling I'm going to be fast forwarding quite a bit. Oh my gosh, we are finally back. 187 seconds is how long that took. So just over 3 minutes. You can see selecting cells is a horrible idea. So how do we fix it? It's actually very, very simple. And don't get confused that I have cell here, because this is just a cell reference. If you had it outside of a loop, you would probably reference the cell something like this. But once you have a working cell reference that points where you want it to point, all you have to do is to take the line where you had a selection, comment that out, and go to the next line, paste it in, and take your range reference and replace selection with your range reference. Then comment out cell select, and now with that small change, let us rerun the macro. Hit play, and let's see how long. I didn't even finish speaking. 1.09 seconds. That's how long it took to run again. So we went from 187 seconds to 1.09 seconds just with that little change of our code. And that's how important that is. Now let's add one more line to get the additional text off of the cells. Cell.value equals, and we're going to use some functions that are actually the same as the worksheet functions. Write, and then what do you want to do? I want to get some text from here. And how much of it do I want to get? Well, I need a length, so I use len, cell.value, but I do not want the first two letters, so -2. Close up write, go to the next line, comment that out, rerun this, and you'll notice we get the O and the dash off for the first one, and run it again, and we should get the second one off. There we go. And it still only took 1.07 seconds. And the timer will almost never be the same every single time that you run the macro, even if it's the same macro on the same data, and that's just the way it is. Now, this is what I think is the most important tip. Now let's go to the next one, where we are going to deal with some of the application settings. And what I'm going to do is just copy this macro. Everything is working. And then we are going to paste it in the next one. All right. So here we are going to tell the macro, hey, I want you to stop updating the screen while you are working. And hey, I want you to stop calculating formulas while you are working. And that's going to save us quite a lot of time. So let's say that we couldn't change our cell selections like this. We had to have selection somewhere, or we don't have time to go through all of our code, or we just don't understand the code. So that's where this is really going to help us. So we can go towards the top and put application.screen updating equals false, and application.not calculate but calculation equals Excel calculation manual. And then grab that and go to the bottom. I'll put it before the timer and change false to true. And delete that and hit Control Space to get the little IntelliSense menu back and choose Excel calculation automatic. Now, let's go back to where we had 187 seconds, okay? So this, and we will comment these guys out. And this time, let's see how long this takes us. Get the immediate window back, Control G, and bring that over here. Click in here, hit play, and I wonder how long it's going to take. 3.19 seconds. So yes, you want to stop selecting cells and you want to stop working on selections for the most part. But if you can't or you don't have the time for it, just go ahead and add these two lines, and at least you won't go crazy waiting for your macros to finish running for the most part. And if we then commented out the selection lines and brought back these guys, we should get a pretty much similar time to what we had previously. So run this to remove the text, and we get 1.05. And now it's time for the final method, and this one is going to speed things up dramatically. But it's also the most difficult to use. So go with tip 1 and tip 2 so that you can make sure that your code is working quickly with little effort. But now, if you want to make sure it works lightning fast, go to the last macro, and here we're going to be dealing with arrays. Arrays are really quite difficult, but now let's see how fast this is, because why are we going to do something so complex if it's not that fast? So let me go down here. You can already see it looks a little bit crazy, and let's go ahead and add the text on, get the immediate window back. And let's go down a little bit and see how long it takes us. So the last one was just over 1 second. Run this. 0.08 seconds. How amazing is that? With this one, you can leave work early. All right. So let us get the text off again, and that should be about the same time. Yes. Now let's close this and take a look at what you need to change if you don't really want to learn that much about it. All right, so copy this macro and paste it where you want to use it. Go down here, change this to the range that you want to go through. Then go down here, change this to the upper left corner of the range where you want to paste the values that you have changed. In our case, this right here, C2, is the first range right here, C2. And when you are in these loops, if you know which column you want to work on, so we are dealing with C, D, and E, and let's go up. If I know that I want to deal with the manufacturer column, then that is the third column in our range reference. You can go inside the first loop right here and change the second part of this to the column that you want to reference. We want to reference the third column in this range, so column E, so we put a 3 right here. And this will get you the value from the cell. Now, if you want to go through every single cell in this range up here, then you use this loop right here, and you go inside of it and you reference the cell like this. So you do not hard code any values for rows or columns, and this will go through every single cell in the entire range reference. And that's all you have to change. Everything else is, for the most part, going to stay the same, and you just work on your values in here however you want to work on them. But now let's take a closer look at how this guy works. All right. So let's start up here. And this is going to be kind of like a quasi-explanation because, like I said, there's so much to do with arrays. I just can't cover it all right here. But in my full VBA course, I have an entire section dedicated to arrays and many useful examples throughout the course. So definitely check that out if you want to learn more about arrays. This is a dynamic array. We know it's an array because it has the open and closing parentheses after it. These are some counter variables we're going to use to go through the array. By the way, if you have variables declared, multiple variables on the same line, you have to put a type for each one, or that one will be declared as a variant. If you don't understand that, don't worry about it. It's not too important, just declare the variables that you are going to use to go through the array. Now here we have some interesting variables which don't matter too much in this tutorial, but in the premium course they play a very important role because we create arrays from arrays and change their size and do all sorts of interesting things. But this is going to store how many rows and how many columns are in the array so that at the end we can properly size the range reference where we put the array back in the worksheet. Now here, of course, we turn off screen updating and calculations. We have our timer, and here we start getting interesting. We take our range reference, we access the values from it, and we put them all inside this array. So now this is an array of values, not range references, not range objects, just values from the cell. And then what do? We loop through all those values. And the first one is the for loop out here. This takes us through the rows in the array. So for I equals L bound, my range array, that stands for lower bound, and then to U bound, which stands for upper bound, my range array. That just says, hey, I want you to go through every element in the array. Okay, so now we're going through every element. And the first series of elements that we go through, if you go like this, technically it's called the first dimension that we're going through. We are going through rows. And as I previously mentioned, if you want to work on a value here, you reference the array, and then the I, the counter variable that you used right here and declared at the top of the macro, you put that in there for the row value, and that allows us to access the next row every time this loop runs. But here we hard code the column reference because we know that we want to deal with column E, and our columns only span 3. So this is 1, 2, and 3. So we hard code that in there, and we are then dealing with the value in column E. Now if you do this, you may not need to go through every single cell in the row, and then you would not need this next loop. However, if you want to go through every single cell in every row and every column, then you need this loop right here. And this loop is structured almost exactly the same as this one up here, except for in the L bound and U bound, we have a comma 2, which says, hey, I want you to work on the second dimension of the array. And the second dimension is where our columns are stored. So you can think of this right here as an address for the values in the array. And here we are looping through the second dimension, the second part of the address. So when we want to reference a value in the array, we type the name of the array, and then we use the counter variable from the outer loop to reference the row, and then the counter variable from the inner loop to reference the column. And that's how we get the values, all of the values from the range inside the inner loop. And then all of this is the same as we had in the previous macro. So we put an O and a dash, and then we just remove it down here. And all that we did is change how we reference the value. So that's basically all there is to it. But of course you can do many, many, many other things in here, including creating new arrays from this array. And when you do that, that's when you have to then once again figure out what is the size of your array, and do you need to shrink it back down? Because we're dealing with arrays for speed. So one thing you do not ever want to do, it's beyond this tutorial, but I'm going to mention it now, is you don't want to resize an array every time this loop runs. So if you are going to put this value into a new array, you don't want to resize that new array every time we get to here. You want to make it so big out here that it can hold as many values as there are in this array. And then once you get to the end of the loop, then you resize it back down. Now that's one of the more powerful things you can do with arrays. But if you do that, and you do resize it down here, you will then no longer know how many rows and how many columns are inside of it. Or you may, depending on how you do things. But that's why I copy and pasted this from my premium VBA course, this little snippet right here. Because we do so many interesting, powerful things, I put a little dynamic way to get the correct number of rows and columns in there. And this is exactly how it's commented in the course. The whole tutorial is used as a reference for arrays that explains exactly how everything works. And this right here is just the technique for getting the number of rows, which accesses the first dimension, and then this one, the number of columns, which accesses the second dimension. That is a little bit confusing if you don't know what's going on with arrays. So I beg your pardon if I've lost you at this point. But they really are so powerful. If you don't know how to use arrays, take some time to learn them. Please, please, please. They will speed everything up and make your life so much better after they've given you a few headaches. But once you get beyond that, it's very good. So then all we do once we have the rows and the columns, we now know the size for the array. Because in order to put an array into the worksheet and not lose any data, not have that data truncated, we have to exactly give the size of the array. So we use a cell reference from the upper left, which is C2. So we go here, and then we do resize to say, hey, be 3 columns, and hey, go 10,000 down, or 10,001. And then we get a reference like this, and we simply paste in the array directly. So here's range C2. Then we resize it to the correct number of rows and columns, access the value property, and pop the range in there. That is so much work. But once you have a template, even just a template like this, you can copy and paste it into your projects and you will have to change almost nothing initially. And then you can add all of your other non-array related code wherever you need to. And by the way, if you do happen to take my premium VBA course and you want to see where we use arrays to the max, then check out the File Import Advanced Analysis tutorial. And that's where you see just how amazing arrays can be. And by that point in the course anyway, you know arrays backwards, forwards, up, and down. But anyway, let's finish out the last few lines of this. So all we do, turn screen updating back on, calculation back on, and the timer. Output that to the immediate window. And you're done. Okay, so it is a lot of stuff. And I could have just told you these 3 techniques for speeding things up very quickly at the beginning, right? Turn off screen updating and calculation, stop selecting cells, and use arrays. But I think it's really important to see examples like this and how they can be used in the worksheet. So I just want to end by taking you back to the immediate window and showing you where we started and where we have ended up. So we started with a very basic macro Writing them how it's very easy to do when you start out, especially if you're using the macro recorder to help teach you how to do things, and you've selected a lot of cells. We started out with 187 seconds. That's how long the first one took, and it totally froze up Excel and was just not a good experience. And by the end, we did that exact same procedure, 0.08 seconds. Arrays, arrays, arrays. Learn how to use arrays, go home from work early.
I hope you liked the tutorial. If it was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.